Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to a video called Winged Hussars, Polish-Lithuanian, Commonwealth and Traditional War Song. I know that the Hussars were a group or culture. No, I think they were more than a culture. They were just a group of warriors. I think it was sort of your profession, right? They were Polish. Apparently they were also Lithuanian, but I think that's just because borders changed throughout the year. So they were Polish-Lithuanian. But yeah, I think they were quite cool. I've seen, not clips obviously, but I've seen some videos of them, and they had these huge wings and they look massively cool. So I can't even imagine how this song and the war song actually sounds like. But let's check it out and comment, like, and subscribe. With fire, oh my god.
Oi šermukšnio, kur tu augai tarp balių.
It's over medieval. Oh.
Kur tu augai tarp balių.
I like it.
Augai tarp balių, tarp šių žalių samanų. Tarp šių žalių samanų.
This also makes me, I don't know, it's kind of catchy. Oh my god, what have you raised me up for? To fight? We have to defeat our enemies. Oh my god, yeah, you conscripted me to war. Oh, I like that I was saying it looks kind of medieval and there were some chainmail happening. I don't know if this is true to the history, but I think it's just giving me those vibes. And also, does the rowan tree signify something? Is that a famous symbol in Poland or Lithuania? Or maybe it grows a lot? They have a lot of rowan trees in that region? Oh my god, the first trumpet. The outer yard because they're in the castle. I like because it's a war song, but I'm kind of like, kind of want to dance. Oh my god, my horse pranced. The army turned to you? Oh my god, now I'm scared. Why the army it's looking at you? Oh my god, a troop of sweets! Oh my god, they're calling them out by name. We knocked them out! This is actually funny. What's Shodowicz? What's that? Was that a real guy? Is this a real king? I'm gonna guess he was the leader, or maybe he was the king. Okay, I really like the song. It's really, again, very medieval sounding. I was not expecting it to sound like that because it's a traditional war song, but again, when you're talking about war songs, specifically this type of, because again, there's so many different types of wars and war songs and traditional sort of folk music. But when it comes to the Hussars, the Winged Hussars, I was expecting something a little bit more, I don't know, frightening maybe, just a little bit scarier, because I know they had a reputation to maintain. They were quite scary. They were quite, their success rate was really, really high. So I was expecting something very intimidating, and I think this one seemed to be more than intimidating. I just find it really nice. It was a really nice song. I like the idea of, it wasn't just a war chant, as in, we're fighting against everyone, or we're just fighting, we're fighting this, whatever, just mindless wars, mindless battles. This was very, I think, very specific. And also, I really love the fact that it was telling us a story. And again, it wasn't just, a cry for a war rally or something. It was more about, let's reflect on this, which I find quite interesting, specifically for a war song, because I'm thinking, well, I don't know if this is the actual sort of history. This is maybe based on a real thing that happened, probably a battle. I'm going to assume that's the case because it looked very, I don't know who pointed. They were talking about Sweden. Well, not Sweden. They were talking about the Swedes. I have no idea the Swedes, who were the Swedes back in that whatever time period this was written, because I know that obviously empires and nationalities and territories and borders are not the things that we know them in this day and age. So who knows what was Sweden like back in those days and what actually was Sweden. But he mentioned, the Swedes came and, again, very pointed, it's the Swedes, they're the enemy. Then they were speaking about this guy who I think was the king, or, the battle. I don't know, maybe the king, maybe I'm going about this wrong. I'm thinking maybe, they had a general, as in the Hussars, they had a general and he was sort of the commander. But actually, now that I'm thinking about this, maybe the actual king of Poland, Lithuania, that maybe wasn't named like that back in those days, but it was named as another thing. Maybe the king of that territory was also the leader of the Hussars, maybe. He didn't have a separate commander. It wasn't as, we have a king and then we have the leader of the Hussars that I think were sort of the military, the army that they had back in those that this territory had. But again, maybe yes, maybe no. I do not know. But it was this Shawwikis. I no idea how you pronounce that. I think it was Shawwikis. I don't know. Guy like that. But they were mentioning, he was a king. He was a real king. He was a true leader. So I don't know. Did he die? Did that guy existed and he died? Maybe the Swedes killed him, and that's why they had beef with the Swedes, as in, we are avenging our leader. Maybe, who knows? But also, I think something I find quite interesting is also because, again, it's a war and there's battles, and obviously I think it's not sort of heavily inspired by one particular battle. Maybe it was a war and the war was against the Swedes, so maybe that's why the pointed comment against the Swedes, maybe that's the case. But however, or maybe, again, it was inspired, maybe not 100% true, who knows. But I like that there was also, I think, some honor in your enemy, in honoring your enemy, which I think sounds a little strange. But I think, because in war, obviously I know that people say, everything goes in war. Yes, of course, obviously. But also I think I know it's a beauty, but I think it's just the honorable thing in sort of, I am acknowledging my enemy in a way that it's not as if, I'm swinging down. It's no, you're not telling them, because obviously throughout the whole thing is, we're going to defeat them. We're going to defeat the Swedes. But at one point they also said something as in, they're brave as well, which I like, because you're also acknowledging your enemy is brave. And because again, you're a little frightened. You're going into battle. It's not an easy thing. And they mentioned it's that as well, as in why have you raised me up? Like, why have you waken me up? And it's because it's not nice. It's not to, here's a plot of land, plant some potatoes. No, it was, you have woken me up to go to war, which is obviously not something that people enjoy and like, because obviously it's a frightening experience. It's awful. And nobody likes this. So, of course, they're actually acknowledging, I don't like it either. It's not as if, great. Now that we're here, of course, we have to do our best and we have to win. But, it's not something that we're just mindlessly violent. No, it's just something that, I had to do because, again, I was conscripted, which, oh my God, who knows? I had no idea that they were using that word back in whatever year this was written. I can't remember exactly in what year the Hussars were active. I want to say 1300s, but I think maybe 1500s. I think they lasted for a very, very long time. But I think maybe 1700s, that seems too new for this, but maybe I'm wrong. But however the case is, I like the idea that, because again, this is a traditional folk song. So I think we tend to think, and I know sometimes I'm guilty of this, and probably I'm not alone in this. I tend to think of, older cultures and older, there was a particular time period, specifically, again, this medieval sort of era. You tend to think of them maybe as, brutes or something, they were maybe a little bit less civilized, or because not smart, because that's not about smartness, it's not about intelligence, maybe because they had so many wars, and it's, oh my God, everyone was in constant war, everyone was in constant battle. So it was a very violent time period, universally, and in the history of the earth. and of the world history. So I tend to think sometimes, oh, they must have loved the violence, they must have loved fighting and killing people. But no, I think songs like this really are more similar, I think, to what you would expect. Someone thinking about this and war and all the effects war has on people, on territories. Is not an easy thing. It's not something that we want. It's something that sometimes it gets to that point, and then you have to fight. But it's not something that they're actively looking for. They're sort of again the person that this song refers to, because it's sort of in first person and then it switches to the third. But again, it's more about I don't want to do this, and of course I'm here, and we're going to be victorious, as in the raw one tree coming out of the swamps and coming out of the moss and stuff. But I think ultimately, the message of the song is, we got our revenge. We have our enemies, and that's all very good. But at the same time, it's sort of, we don't like doing this. It's not as if we love going to war. It's not as if I love killing people. No, I think that's something really, it's kind of sad actually, when once you actually start thinking about this. Because the person in the song, the guy in the song says something as if, mom, mom, why have you woken me up? Which makes me think of a very small, well, not small, but just a young kid. So I know that back in those days, it didn't have the concept we have in this day and age of, you're a child, and then you're a teen, well, you're a preteen, and then you're a teen, and then you're an adult. It's not, they didn't really have that. It was probably, I think, you're a child, but at the same time, you're probably old enough to grab, if you were old enough to, I think, grab a shovel, congratulations, you're a farmer, you're 8 years old, but, you can plant, you can do stuff, and you can, sort of work to earn your keep. I always say I do not know, probably when it comes to war, it was a little bit different, you probably needed to be a little bit older. But I think my point is, that still they were young boys, and it's kind of really sad to think they're calling for their mothers. It's sort of, oh my god, that's kind of heartbreaking, because I know the song, and I don't really know if this is sort of based on one particular battle, one particular experience, or it's just sort of, someone told me, as folklore. It's someone, so at telephone game, someone heard from the other, I heard it from this person, and then someone decides to put this in a song. But at the same time, I know that the actual sort of the root of this and the nature of the song and the message, I think, remains, which is nobody really likes war, nobody likes fighting. And again, if you think about it, how sad it must have been for all the young boys just sort of being conscripted to war, in a war that probably they weren't, I don't know, this is not, well, technically it's my battle, but it's not something I would have chosen. And they're calling for their mothers because they're very young. So it's kind of heartbreaking to think, obviously this was the story, maybe it was not the story of one particular person, but at the same time it kind of was, because I imagine that must have happened, countless of times, because I don't know how many Hussars there were throughout history. But it's really, I think it gives you an interesting perspective, and it wasn't at all what I was expecting, especially I think because, again, Hussars have this reputation, or at least from what I've seen, of being very frightening, and they look so cool though. I mean, the coolness factor, absolutely maximum to the level. The wings, and I think they had eagle wings and stuff, and they used feathers, eagle feathers, and everything looked cool. And they had this big sort of headdresses, and they were in horses, and they were great warriors. But again, this is sort of the other perspective of, of one group. Again, it was their profession, I think. Well, technically at that point, your profession and your life was kind of intrinsically tied. It's not as if, I'm going to the office and then I forget all about my office. No, this is sort of, if you're a warrior and you're a hussar, I think that's really part of your life. Obviously, back in those days, it wasn't as you could separate this as my job. It's just what I do with my life. But again, at the same time, this is sort of another perspective of this really interesting group of warriors, because that doesn't make them any less frightening, because, this song, as I mentioned, is really sad and all of the stuff I talked about, but it doesn't make them less scary. It doesn't make them any less cool, but it does make them look more human to me, as in, I think it's easy, again, when you listen to those tales of, they did all these great feats, and they killed, they defeated this huge army, and there were 100 of them, and they defeated an army of 1,000. I don't know, you're thinking all the stories, and again, it makes them look almost as a supernatural thing, as in, oh my god, who are these people? But again, it's making me think of them, no, they were human, and this kind of songs is really nice, because they were human. It makes them more of of a human like quality that I think maybe gets a little lost when you talk about the legend of the Hussars. Is no, yeah, it's both. They were quite legendary in their fighting and everything they did. But again, we have to also keep in mind how human they were, and they were not so different from people, in this day and age, which I think it's comforting in a way, because it makes me, I don't know, it makes you probably feel a little bit closer and think humans have not changed that much, even though it has been 500 years, 800 years, 400 years, or 600 years. But it's good in a way. It's sort of, we have another side of the story that we probably wouldn't get otherwise. So good for folk. I think is really important. Folk music is really important to actually preserve history. As we can see, is those kind of things would have been lost if someone doesn't decide to, what, I'm going to sing this story. And then again, if somebody sings it, somebody learns it, and then you teach it to your kids, and then your kids teach it to their friends. That's how it spreads, and then that's how we're listening to the song that was written. God knows how many years ago this was written. But this was very interesting, and that was it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye!